Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A serious topic today. Let's do it. Former gang members. What made you leave? And has the past ever come back to haunt you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Personally, I ended up getting out because I realized the pattern I was falling into. Before I even turned 18, I had 6 charges on my record, 2 of them felonies, and I was on third strike, which basically means if I commit another violent crime, I can be locked away for life automatically, and any non-violent crime, no matter how small it is, it can be an automatic 7 years if they choose. As of right now, since my charges were all between the ages of 13 and 16, I've been told if I don't get in trouble for the next 10 years after my last charge, 2013, I can get my records expunged. So that's what I'm aiming for at the moment, but it's crazy. Knowing any little thing can send me back for such a long time because of how stupid I was as a teen. A lot of my friends never got the chance to get out. One of my friends is doing 12 years. He's been in there since he was 17, and another one is doing life. So I'm just glad I got out before that happened, but I still have to be careful. Going to try to keep it as short and to the point as possible, while giving context to understand how it all started. Basically, story of a good grades kid turning into a gangbanger. Rough neighborhood, Northern California. Hispanic. Norteños, Northerners. Red. Insult name busters. Versus Serenos, Southerners. Blue. Insult name scraps, sewer rats. My family was Norte. Our number is 14 because N is 14th letter of the alphabet, Nuestra Familia. Surs used 13 for M, Mexican Mafia. Backstory. Good grades, advanced classes in elementary, pre-AP and AP advanced placement classes in middle and high school. Took care of grandparents. Didn't have much, but I was grateful. Learned how important $100 can be for groceries or bills early on. Joined Norte after I tried taking the bus to my first year of high school when some sirs jumped me and then continued to rob me at the bus stop for a week straight. Every afternoon when I got home. Got tired of it. My uncles drove up with some sawed-offs and an old Tech 9. We don't all have AKs. They ran off, and I had no troubles after. Felt badass. Like a man for once. Like I actually had control. Grandparents got sick during my middle school years, and by my freshman year I was cooking dinner and cleaning and buying groceries, etc. Started selling weed and leftover pain medication my grandparents didn't use. Grandpa was born in the 40s and worked in a steel mill for decades. Seen him get bit by snakes and dogs and not even flinch, so his Vicodin and Oxy literally piled up because he wanted to look tough by not taking it, to not make me think he was really sick and dying. I was the only person the AP kids could go to for weed since all my homies scared them. They only saw me as a decent person because I had classes with them and would occasionally make jokes and just be pleasant to be all around. So they saw me differently. Plus the athletes only got tested for weed, so they bought plenty of pills off me. Got in lots of gang fights. Couple of robberies where no one was home, not like GTA liquor store shit, and occasionally had to pull my grandpa's 357 out when people came around my house trying to jump me. Thankfully, never got into actual gunfights. I did 2 drive-bys with some older homies, but it wasn't like the movies. Just drove past the house and unloaded into the windows to send a message. Had a good handful of my childhood friends die. One from stabbing and bleeding out on the way to the hospital, because no one would call 911 when gang shit pops off, even if it's a teen. 2 that OD'd, 1 suicide, 3 from gunshots, and my best friend was run over. Grandparents died into my junior year. Had to move to Arizona with family, about as far down south as you could get compared to NorCal. Thought I was going to get jumped by a bunch of scraps my first day of school there. No one did anything. Everyone was interested in the new kid from Cali. Obviously looked like a gangbanger, dressed like one, so I was instantly cool. Plus I had some advanced classes, so the teachers and students wanted me to introduce myself and talk about where I was from. Just like my old AP friends in Cali, they were surprised that I was a decent person, made lots of friends. finished high school and graduated, and am now working in insurance claims for a credit card company while taking community college classes. The biggest realization came when I talked about my gang affiliations, and no one in Arizona knew what the F I was talking about. One cute girl in the group I was hanging out in said, "So it's basically like LA gangsters, except you wear red and tag. 14. Oh, and you don't wear your flannels with only the top button buttoned?" Really showed me how stupid gangbanging was when Norte and Sirs are the same exact thing, with very minor differences. I still have lots of family and friends who gangbang, and the only time I talk to friends from my hometown are when another old friend dies and they call me to let me know. Don't gangbang. Go to school or work. There's enough people dying in the world already. TL, DR. All my friends and loved ones started dying, and my education ended up being my escape. When we're young and impressionable, that's when we're most vulnerable or susceptible to manipulation like that, so it's a testament to your character that you did get out, so good for you. And it doesn't seem like a very alluring lifestyle long term. Age and the family. You cannot be in a gang and live a family life at the same time. At some point, you literally get too old for that shit. Got older and seemed stupid. Felt stupid representing a group of 7th grade dropouts. I wanted to represent myself. The ones that aren't dead or in prison still live with their parents, and all they have going for them in life is that red bandana. A couple of 3 things. A. Got too old for that shit. B. Joined the army. And C. Realized, thankfully not too late, almost shooting an MFer dead for talking shit to my boy wasn't in my best interests long term. I think back to that point and thank F I did not do something so dumb. Cringy. Brazilian here. I was a teenager in the mid-2000s. Used to hang with a lot of other kids who were also low middle class and had a lot of time and liberty to be on the streets causing havoc. A lot of them were hooligans. In Brazil, hooligans are really common in major cities with big football teams, but it's somewhat different from those in Europe. People hang in the torcidas ordenados, wear uniforms, sometimes carry guns, and fight over petty shit with people from other torcidas. The main goal is to beat and steal the other crew's materials like shirts, hats, flags, and this kind of shit. It's not uncommon to see people die over this ridiculous nonsense. Anyway, it was a large gang, but no one did heavy stuff, like killing people, even though sometimes someone was packing a revolver or a pistol. At least I never heard of something like that. We used to beat the crap out of other people from other hoods, though. Some of us were really violent. A lot of my friends trained martial arts just for the sake of kicking people's asses on the streets. I stopped hanging around because some of my friends got arrested for attempted murder, and they just didn't give a single F even after jail. Some of them also sold weed, and I began to wake up to the fact that shit was getting more serious. I had a lot of doubts before, after seeing people get wrecked over nothing, like random street fights were common. I saw a couple of random dudes getting their heads stepped on, noses exploded, teeth broken, people threatening others with fire weapons. I chose to focus on school, and years later I'm a lawyer with no criminal background, thankfully. My friends from that time are doing okay, I guess. They're alive, and I think that's a good thing, considering what they used to do, and how many enemies they made. I'm sorry if I made any grammar mistakes. I'm Brazilian, and rarely write in English. It's perfect. I wouldn't necessarily call it a gang, but basically I used to hang out with a bunch of criminals, burglars, drug dealers. They even pulled some extortion on people I know. I was this skinny 18-year-old nerd just there to smoke weed, while these people would sometimes walk in with stolen TVs, pounds of weed, and crack. I met them through a mutual friend I knew growing up. He dropped out of high school and never did anything to improve, while I had started a career. I was a college dropout. By the time I started my job, I just ghosted him and basically everyone else I knew. At that point, I'd only been hanging out with people I smoked with, which was like 2 to 3 people, completely, and don't see any of them anymore. We all live in the same borough, so we sometimes cross paths, but They don't really say much. I never got in any fights, but I was in a constant position where if we got pulled over by the cops, I would have ruined my life. At one point, I had such terrible anxiety when driving, my legs would shake uncontrollably. My entire body was shivering in the middle of July. Getting a phone call would trigger my anxiety, as it probably meant we were going somewhere. I still deal with anxiety today, and also some pretty bad overall depression. In junior high, I used to hang out with D's. I grew up with them. When they were juniors, I dated a few, partied with them, hung out, and played kick the can, etc. We weren't full-fledged teens yet, so we just got to be silly kids. Fast forward 2 years, 15-ish, and they had to get jumped in, sell coke, carry straps, protect the block, and I stopped hanging out with them. 2 or 3 of them would still come to my house to hang out, and I could tell they weren't fond of their new expectations. They would call the cops on their own gang activity so they could take a day off and claim it's too hot. When I brought over my new high school friends and they all met, they fit in fine. They could have been regular kids, but the pressure became apparent when we would make plans and they couldn't come with us to the beach or pools or Six Flags, etc. There were days that the whole gang went, and that was out of protection. They did go out with us once in a while, and to me it was so normal. They were just like a little older, but still the same goofy kids I grew up with. They didn't gangbang around us. They didn't challenge anyone's affiliations. They didn't charge us for the weed. They could have been regular teens. Fast forward 2 more years, and the full-fledged boys in blue and black had dropped out, started hanging out with older gang members and proving themselves. I had already stopped talking to them, but heard from the grapevine that 1 was killed and 2 was in jail for attempted murder and 3 running from a warrant for an armed robbery. They became the stereotype, misogynistic, ignorant, rude, crimey dudes you ignored like bums. All because older dudes took advantage of them and their willingness to prove themselves. They were decent kids at first. They didn't leave. The gang left them. When you have friends and acquaintances that could get you killed just by association, it's probably a friendship you should reconsider. I used to be a big brother in a certain chivalrous organization. There were a combination of factors for my departure. Chief among them was that I had a serious problem with the newer generations and how they perceived power, and quite frankly, I grew tired. Of those that joined our ranks, who were from the newer generations, they did not understand basic concepts of honor, respect, or dignity, which added pressure to an increasingly volatile territorial issue that we were facing. They didn't seem to understand that violence was only meant to be a tool, not just the way we handled every interaction with everybody that we encountered. We filled a niche that law enforcement weren't traditionally able to accommodate, but there was obviously a darker side to our work, and some people were neither mentally nor psychologically capable of handling the dual nature of our existence in society. There was what I'd consider a huge war that erupted a few decades ago, when one of the bosses of a large, chivalrous organization had passed away naturally of a heart attack. This left a power vacuum that wasn't meant to stay empty because of the ambitions of several men who felt that it was their right to step up and fill that absence. Long story short, there were many of us who were killed or seriously injured. I was shot several times during all of this, but managed to survive. At this point, I decided that I had had enough. I'd been learning English, Russian, and German, working on becoming fluent in those languages, which was very difficult. During the chaos of the fallout of what happened, I grabbed my rainy day fund and fled the country to live abroad. Since then, I've lived simply, without the ostentatious displays of wealth and power that I had been accustomed to. I hated every minute of it initially, and wept bitterly over the loss of my possessions, my lifestyle, my brothers, my home. I now work as a baker, living a much simpler but more satisfying life, and I'm raising a daughter. I stay away from nightlife, which is incompatible with my work hours, and trying to be a responsible parent. I don't drink or smoke anymore. I'm friendly with the people I work with and with customers, but I never talk about myself, preferring instead to ask them questions about themselves. People will tell you anything if you show interest when they talk about themselves. which was one of the key tools I learned back in my past life. So far, no repercussions from my past as far as I can tell, which is more than what I deserve if I'm being honest. I imagine someday everything will catch up with me, but I want to shield my daughter from all of that as much as I can. I want her memories of me to be favorable. I want her to believe that I am a boring person who has a banal routine and simple pleasures. It would certainly appear to me, a layperson in this regard, you did the absolute right thing. And it sounds like you're raising your daughter in the light, and good for you. And hopefully the past stays where it belongs. I used to chill with Redacted, a very renowned US gang, who grew up together because they were nice guys to me, and they had great drug prices. Plus, who doesn't want real 30-plus-year-old gang members to have your back when you're a friendless minority? I'm white, going to an extremely low-income high school. I remember coming home, and homie being in my house, doing nothing except scraping his grinder with a pocket knife. He also had his pistol on the table. That's pretty obnoxious even today, like, bruh, I know you're a shooter. You don't gotta flex on me like that. I can still hear him today. Bet you didn't expect to come home and see that. Motions to gun, did you? Bruh, I totally expect that at this point. And this guy, gangster number one, would always get pissed drunk and tell me that I don't know shit about life or God, while also crying to me about people he's killed. I try to empathize, but this becomes a chore when you hear it several times per month. Gangster number two was the pusher. Most quality shit in town. These guys would hang out together since childhood, so I would go over to number two's house, who also 30 plus and has been in the game 20 plus, and just get amazing drugs while listening to them tell me who they pulled up on. Example, kids walking around in blue in their neighborhood, so he warns them with strong words. He sees them in a bigger group a couple minutes later and pulls his AK on them and tells them they need to leave now. Anyways, this was all great fun for me as a kid or young adult. But then there was this fight, and my brother was involved. He was hanging out with them in a bar fight, then a shootout broke out. My brother tells me he fought, but the gang members later came over to the house and chided him for disappearing during the fight. There were people shot, and Gangster 1 and 2 hopped in their cars and continued the shootout with the other gang while they were driving. Anyways, it was then that I realized that my brother shouldn't have to apologize for running from that situation, which I believe he did. F getting shot over some dumb shit like that. So it was kind of then that I realized that I could get pulled up on if I was hanging out with these guys. I broke ties. They weren't extremely happy. They frequently knocked on my door and talked to me about how what I'm doing isn't cool, but they never assaulted or threatened me. So I really believe that they were literally being as nice as they possibly could. Anyways, I stopped talking to them about 5 or 6 years ago when I moved to another town. Sometimes I talk to them on Facebook though. Some of the friends I made through them ended up murdered by rival gangs, not because of me. It's really hard, man. It really makes me see how pointless shooting and really violence is in general. Oh yeah, I also got a shotgun pulled on me. Like the dude cocked it and aimed it right at me in public, and the cops never showed up after they were called, so that wasn't awesome. Anyways, I might have put too much info on here, so I don't know. If I'll keep it up, let me just say to you youngins, it's really not worth it to bang, like at all. You can make like a few $100 extra per week, but you can also get shot for some dumbass reason. Met my now wife, cleaned myself up. She showed me I could be better than what I was, got out, had to leave the state. I had gotten into some trouble boosting cars, asked the judge if I could join the military. The rest is history. This was back in '93. I do not regret it. Some of my former banger friends found me on Facebook years later. Most are dead or in prison. The ones not got out too. It's just nuts to think of what I would have become. My mom used to run with a gang in one of the larger suburbs of Chicago when she was very young, 15 or 16. She said that one of the last things she did with these people was steal guns from her friend's dad, and then at gunpoint in a van they were in, she got a gun put to her head and told she was going to rob a convenience store. She did. My grandmother found out and put my mother in a mental hospital for her protection, and then placed in witness protection of sorts. Moved downstate, and she hasn't really been back. It's a time that my mom really doesn't talk about too much, but when she does, it carries extra weight.